Welcome to our Rotherham Sendias video about options following the local authority's decision not to carry out an EHC Needs Assessment. This video also has an additional focus on mediation. So how do you know the local authority have made a decision not to assess for an education, health and care needs assessment? Following the request to the local authority to carry out an EHC Needs Assessment, they will have 6 weeks to make their first decision. The local authority will write to you at week 6. Or more likely, you'll receive an email to let you know to log on to the EHC Hub as new information will have been added. The local authority's outcome letter will either say that they have agreed to do the assessment for your child or that they have made the decision not to assess at this point. The letter should be dated and it should also have information on of your options at this point, including timescales for mediation, appeal and where to gain impartial information, advice and support. Take a moment to read the contents of the letter. In Rotherham, the letters usually provide reasons why the assessment request has been refused at this time. Although there may be additional details or suggestions of further ways to gain support for your child within the letter, the local authority will have had to make their decision based on the following legal test: whether your child or young person has or may have special educational needs, and whether they may need special educational provision to be made through an EHC plan. You'll find this legal test in Section 36 of the Children and Families Act. So what are your options at this point? The first option is to accept the outcome. You could consider arranging a time to speak with your school SENCO. Use the letter as the basis for this discussion, and if there are other suggestions of support, then discuss this in detail, maintaining and building on the support from the school's graduated response. You can find further information about the graduated response from our website, or by having a look on the SENCO Rotherham website, and the address for that is here. You could work towards another request in the future. The local authority may have refused this request, but there is nothing preventing a future request being submitted once additional work has taken place, or once there is additional evidence available to support the legal test. There's no specific timescale that needs to be considered before another request is made at this point. The third option is to consider mediation. You can make contact with the mediation company and request a mediation meeting. Contact with the mediation company would have to be made within 2 months from the date of the local authority's decision letter. You can find all their details on the letter and further in this video too. And the final option is to appeal. You can appeal the local authority's decision and you have 2 months from the date of the local authority's letter or 1 month from the date of the mediation certificate to lodge your appeal. You may wish to take a look at our information on our website and our YouTube video, Things to Consider Before Appealing, before taking this step. The rest of this video will now focus on the mediation process for a refusal to assess for an EHC Needs Assessment. So here's some things to consider before you contact the mediation company. Firstly, consider the legal test for carrying out an EHC Needs Assessment. The legal test is in 2 parts. The first part is that the child has or may have special educational needs, and the second part is they may need provision via an EHC plan. So what do we mean by special educational needs or a disability? A child or young person has SEND if they have a learning difficulty or disability which calls for special educational provision to be made for them. A child is considered to have a learning difficulty if they have a significantly greater difficulty in learning than the majority of others of the same age, or they have a disability which prevents or hinders them from making use of facilities of a kind generally provided for others of the same age in mainstream schools or mainstream post-16 schools. In the Equality Act, a person is classed as disabled if they have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on a person's ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. We also need to be aware of what we mean by SEN provision. Special educational provision is provision that's different or additional to that that's normally available to pupils or students of the same age. And for children under 2 years old, it's educational provision of any kind. Secondly, it might be useful to consider the evidence the local authority had available to make their decision. Ask yourself, does your child have special educational needs or a disability? And use the legal definitions on the previous slide to check if this is the case. For example, there may be some children who need additional support for meeting their medical needs. This may not, however, be considered special educational needs or a disability. Remember the points about having a learning difficulty or disability. Does the evidence show that your child may have SEND and that SEND provision may be needed via an EHC plan? Remember, there are two ways of providing SEND provision, either by the schools using their own resources and following a graduated response, or by an EHC plan. If the evidence shows that your child's needs can be met from the school's own resources within the graduated response, then the local authority may have felt it appropriate to refuse the assessment at this time. You might want to take a look at our YouTube video on SEN support in mainstream schools, which outlines this further. So now what? If, considering the information on the previous slides and the evidence you have available, you believe the local authority made the wrong decision, or if you have additional evidence to present to the local authority since they made their decision and you feel this now supports the legal test, then you may wish to contact mediation and request a mediation meeting be arranged. Rotherham Local Authority have commissioned Collis Mediation to carry out the mediations following the EHC process decisions. You can find Collis Mediation at www.collismediationltd.com. You can call them at 077 159 58290 or email them at info@collismediationltd.com. Remember, if you wish to mediate, you have to contact Collis Mediation within 2 months of the local authority's decision letter refusing the EHC Needs Assessment. If you email mediation, or if when you call it goes to a voicemail, please leave your name, your child's name and date of birth and your contact details. Please also leave them the date of the local authority's decision letter, the reason you wish to mediate, for example that the local authority have refused an assessment, and that you are from the Rotherham area. This is important as Collis Mediation have also been commissioned by other local authorities too for the same reason. Collis Mediation will arrange to have a discussion with you about mediation. This is called mediation advice. If you agree at this point to enter into a mediation meeting, then Collis Mediation will work together with you and the local authority to arrange a mediation meeting that's convenient to all. If you decide you don't want to mediate at this point, they will send you a mediation certificate within 3 days of this conversation. A mediation meeting has to be arranged within 30 days of your request for mediation. So who attends a mediation meeting? There are 3 key parties at a mediation meeting. You, or if the mediation is about a young person over the age of 16, the young person would be expected to be part of that. The local authority. The local authority must send a representative who has decision-making powers. This means they would be able to agree to assess at mediation if the evidence supported the legal test, and the case would not have to be discussed again in panel to make a different decision. And then there's the mediator. They're the ones who facilitate the discussions and ensure the meeting runs smoothly. They also capture any agreements in writing to provide a mediation agreement following the meeting. However, you may also feel it's important to have someone to offer you support, or to include your school SENCO or other relevant parties in the discussions too. If you feel this is needed, then please ask the mediator to request this and provide them with the correct contact details. So here's some practical tips to help you prepare for your mediation meeting. Gathering and sharing additional evidence. Since the local authority made their decision not to assess, you may have been provided with additional evidence from other services or from school. For example, outcomes of health assessments or diagnosis confirmation, reports from other services involved such as educational psychologists or the specialist inclusion team, or updated SEN support plans. Your child may have been through other processes too, or experienced exclusions. The letters from such processes may also provide additional evidence. If this is the case, please ensure you share these with the mediator and the designated local authority representative before the mediation takes place. This provides them with the time to read and consider the additional information before you meet. Familiarise yourself with the evidence available and consider this in light of the legal test and the level of support that can and should be available at the graduated response level. Remember, you're aiming to show the support needed may be beyond that of a graduated response level. Prepare your evidence. You may wish to highlight on copies of reports, not the originals, all the sections in the evidence that show an SEN, and then in another colour highlight all the SEND provision. This will provide the local authority representative a very visual way of showing your child might meet the legal test for an EHC Needs Assessment. You could work together with the school SENCO to get a good understanding of the current support in place from within their own resources. The SENCO may have had a provision map which shows this information, and then highlight any provisions that have been suggested in reports but are not yet implemented. So this slide just shows an example from some evidence that might have been taken. So you can see here we have a section of an educational psychology report, and highlighted in yellow is an identified special educational need. So this says that a child has fine motor skills challenges and struggles to hold a pencil with any strength. Next, there is a highlighted provision highlighted in pink, and this shows the child should have 15 minutes of fine motor skills sessions each day to work on development and a tripod grasp. So on this slide, there are a couple of examples of what a provision map might look like from a school's perspective. This just highlights exactly what support is in place, whether it's group or individual, and how much of that support is needed. So here's another practical tip. Make some notes of any points you wish to discuss in mediation. You might be asked to say a little bit about your child at the beginning of the mediation meeting. If you think you'll feel overwhelmed by this, or you worry your words will fail you, then make some notes in advance. It's good to share some of the positives about your child as well as some of the areas that you're worried about too. Be prepared to both talk but also to listen. All parties will be provided with the time to share their thoughts. This will include the local authority so they can explain how they made their decision in the first instance. Remember why you're there. It can be really easy to get carried away in the mediation meeting and start to talk about the future. For example, you might find yourself mentioning what type of school you feel would be better able to meet your child's needs in a year or two. We would always suggest that it is not the place to have this discussion. Try wherever possible to stick to your points in relation to this legal test for the local authority carrying out the EHC Needs Assessment. Remember, at this stage, you're not even trying to show that the local authority should issue an EHC plan. Feel able to remind others why you're there too. There might be occasions where other people, including the local authority, start to talk about the evidence that will be needed for issuing an EHC plan, or start to discuss possible future schools such as special schools. Feel able to offer a polite reminder that you're only there to discuss the possible agreement of an EHC Needs Assessment. This is important so people don't get confused about the legal test they are considering in light of this particular decision, or start to jump to conclusions about future decisions that are yet to be made. Remember, the local authority representative must have decision-making powers. They shouldn't need to take something back to panel to check an agreement from the mediation meeting. Make your own notes or ask your supporter to do this for you. The mediators are skilled in capturing any agreed actions from the discussions that take place. However, it might also be helpful for you to also take a note of anything that anyone has agreed to do. At the end of the meeting, the mediator should go over these with everyone. You might wish to tick them off your list too as they summarise and offer a polite reminder if you feel some information has been missed. Check agreements are clear and have timescales attached. All agreements should be clear and have some timescales. If this is not the case, then please ask for this to be discussed, agreed and recorded. If there's an agreement to assess your child at the mediation meeting, the legislation specifies that the local authority must send notification to the child's parent or young person that they have agreed to make an assessment within 2 weeks from the notification. However, this timescale doesn't apply if there has been a written agreement for different timescales as part of the mediation process. So what happens next? If there's been an agreement to carry out an EHC Needs Assessment at the mediation meeting, this should be clearly recorded, along with any other agreements that were made in the mediation agreement. The mediation agreement will then be sent out to you and to the local authority. If you've not received this with your mediation certificate, then contact mediation as soon as possible. The mediator must send you a mediation certificate which shows you have participated in mediation within 3 working days of the mediation meeting taking place. Your right of appeal, if needed, will now be either 2 months from the local authority's original decision or 1 month from the date of the mediation certificate, whichever is the later. If for some reason you haven't had notification from the local authority that they have agreed to assess following mediation, then you may wish to first contact the local authority representative to check that this has been sent. But if it is still not provided as per the mediation agreement outcome, then you may wish to lodge your appeal without further delay. We hope this information has been helpful for you, but please feel free to also make contact with Rotherham Sendias for anything further.